Another person who spoke at that Members' Day 3 years ago was Felix Walker-Nix, also another old HOS member, as it were. Felix is a hugely successful photographer. When you hear what he's done in his relatively short life, you'll be amazed. Living in a rural corner of Hampshire, he takes every opportunity to observe nature, not just birds, as you will see. He also takes photographs of mammals too. Not just great photographs, but also he wins awards for them as well. In fact, he's now won 7 awards. So we've asked Felix to showcase some of his favourite wildlife subjects. Please welcome Felix Walker-Nix.
Thank you very much, Keith, and thank you everyone for having me. So, every photo tells a story, and today I'm going to take you through a year of British wildlife from my perspective and from my lens as I've seen it over the past 5 years. Each photo contains an endless amount of memories, from learning about the subject, beginning to see it for the first time, looking it in the eye, getting closer, and finally taking the photo. Then follows the buzz of pure excitement having taken my photo and being able to share it with all of you. A little bit about me before we start. I'm 16 years old now, but I've been photographing for the past 5 years. I started in lockdown 2020, when my primary school gave me an opportunity to make a nature diary. So I persuaded my mum to use her camera, and she taught me how to take photos. Then followed every day since, pretty much, getting out with the camera, seeing what I can find in the local area. I began by photographing flowers, but soon began photographing mammals from spotting hares on local fields. I now sell my photos, which has been great fun, as well as I've been on the news multiple times, and I've won 2 national awards, British Wildlife Photographer of the Year, in the 12 to 14 category in 2022 and 2023. It was a bit of a shock actually going on the press, because I went on the radio without knowing it was live. I managed to say in the middle of an interview, "Are we live?" But it's been good fun. I'm going to go through the 4 seasons, so starting with winter, with some of our some common birds for me, really, that live locally to me, with my favourite barn owl, which is a real symbol of British owls, I think, and certainly a symbol of the South Downs where I live. As well, we've got the blue tit, which is often quite an underrated bird, I think. Very cute, hopping around our feeders, and we often see them in the garden. So it was a pleasure to be able to get out in the snow and photograph this one on the left of the screen. I've managed to photograph a few rarities over winter too. And the great white egret at Romsey, with only 30 breeding pairs in the UK, was an absolute privilege to photograph. As well as waxwing in Romsey last January, which I'm sure many of you went to see, which is a privilege to go and watch. Recently, I photographed Dartford warbler at Normandy Lagoon, same place as the roseate terns Amy just spoke about. And water owl, as on the left of the screen, which I spent about 3 years trying to track, hearing distant calls, eventually getting closer and finally getting a picture. I'm also going to be talking about amphibians, mammals, and some insects too. So not just birds for a HOS talk. Frogs are one of my favourite things to photograph over winter, famed for their breeding in February time. This was actually taken at a neighbour's pond, which had about 150 frogs in it. So I was walking past, and there was this beautiful sound of all the frogs calling, which was just amazing to listen to. And then lying down to the garden, getting closer and closer, and getting pictures like that, which was really amazing to watch. As well as photographing deer, so sort of fallow deer I took in the New Forest recently. But it's amazing, the array of species we get in Hampshire. Finally, onto spring. Those longer, sunnier, warmer days make me so happy, really. And breeding birds too. So the arrival of migrants, we got a common tern on the top right, as well as sedge warbler in the top centre, and a wheatear, which I think are really gorgeous birds we get locally. Owls, I try and photograph as much as I possibly can. Locally, I have a barn owl, tawny owl, and little owl, and I've managed to photograph young of all of them, but it's been a real challenge and such fun. Little owl aren't actually native to the UK. They've been introduced through escapees from collections in the 1800s and 1900s, but they come naturalised to the UK for the wildlife we have, mainly eating insects. And this tawny owl on the bottom right, we called him Brian. It was a local name for him, and I persuaded my mum to drive me out a good hour's round trip, every night for a couple of weeks, just to photograph Brian and his chicks. I'm going to do a little bit about birds and their young. So these were the great crested grebes that were at Lakeside in Eastleigh last year. We heard about them on Facebook and raced down to see if I could see the humbug chicks, which I'd never seen before, riding around on the parents' backs. It was actually amazing to watch the behaviour of these birds, being able to see them up close, but they were relatively comfortable with people on the fishing lake. This one on the right, passing over food, was just a magical experience to watch. But as well, just watching them on the back, as both parents cared for the chicks, and interesting behaviour like the adults sharing feathers to each other. Also in spring, back to owlets, one of my favourite things to photograph still, these little owls on the left, and the little tawny owlet in the top left, which is always a tricky one to find, but they're cool, I chase them for days. On the right, we have the herons in Winchester. This is on the weirs with the city mill in the backdrop, which is just down the road from here, and quite a famous pair of herons, with the young one on top of the railing there. This image won British Wildlife Photographer of the Year in the 12 to 14 category in 2023, which is actually quite an old image, so such a shock it actually won. My dad spotted it when we were on a family walk a couple of years ago, and I gradually crawled closer, not realising that the young fawn was there too. Eventually, the doe turned to lift her head, and the fawn came out and poked its head out her legs. It was just amazing to watch. In summer and in spring, it's been amazing to watch badgers. This is my first badger I photographed, and the first one I actually saw. I was trying to photograph foxes, and I heard a rustling in the bushes to my side. I turned and changed my settings, and I stopped. I couldn't press the shutter because I was so shocked a badger had come out. I think it was just a shock to see me, really, because it stopped too and just stared at me blankly. But again, it's just countless memories for me. Finally, into summer, which is almost my favourite time of year, getting out in the summer holidays, away from school for 6 long weeks to be out in wildlife. This bar now, it's about half an hour's walk from my house, and I photographed it nearly every day for about 2 months, trying to catch up with it. But this photo was only taken on the second day. After I went a bit downhill, I didn't see it so often. So it's not always patience that helps. It can be a bit of luck too. I want to take a little moment to talk about red kites, because they're a real symbol of a conservation success. They were going extinct in the 1960s in Britain, but through reintroduction, there's now over 6,000 pairs from reintroductions in the 80s and 90s. And they've had a 1,450% increase in population. This kite is from a nest just a couple of, half an hour's walk from my house, which the gamekeeper tells me was the first site of the first kite nest in Hampshire. So it's quite a proud little thing for my local area. But they're amazing to watch wheeling over the downs and a real symbol of conservation. Some more birds. These waders in the top right, we've got the ringed plover and the dun were taken in Gower Peninsula in South Wales, but are both native to Hampshire, so I thought I could include it in the talk. They're very cute to watch. Again, for photography for me, it was a great experience, getting low and crawling through the mud flats, trying to get up to them and get some quite intimate photos, which is just amazing to watch. They're really special birds. The wood pigeon on the bottom left as well. I thought I'd include him. Quite a common bird that I'm sure we've all seen, and probably all seen just today. But this image I was selling at one of my village fetes where I was selling photos a couple of years ago. And a lady came up to me, and she said she hated pigeons. And I tried to tell her that they're actually really beautiful birds and quite characterful too. And eventually, after looking at my photo, she decided that, you know what, that's the most pretty pigeon she's ever seen. Again, in summer, I liked getting out photographing mammals. It's real roe deer season for me. So the roe deer rut is from sort of May, June time, but then I photographed lots of yearlings, such as this one on the right, which I photographed in August. It was a case of I spotted it on the other end of the field, so I quickly got down to see if I'd have any luck with waiting. Gradually, she walked towards me, and eventually, she was just up next to me, and I managed to get some quite close photos. But it was amazing to watch with that gorgeous, warm evening light. So roe deer are one of my favourite things to photograph too. As well as slow worms, we've got quite a few reptiles in Hampshire, adders, grass snakes too. I haven't had so much luck photographing them though. And the hummingbird hawk moth, which is a real amazing little insect to see, so keep your eye out for that in summer. I couldn't do a presentation without talking about hares, by far my favourite thing to talk about, and to photograph. The image on the top right won British Wildlife Photographer of the Year in my age category in 2023. Again, another complete shock. It was my first proper competition win. But I have to say, the one in the centre, in the top, is my absolute favourite. I took it in June last year. And I think it's having a bit of a bad hair day. Going through a moult there, but amazing to watch. But the thing with hares for me is really just getting to know them as characters, and that's what they are, why I love photography. It's not just going out and taking a picture, it's getting to know the subject and having that connection to wildlife. For each of the hares I try and photograph, I get to know the individual groups. I go out with them as much as I possibly can, spot them on the other side of the field, get to know their characters. They've all got personalities. There are friendly ones that are all inquisitive to why you're in the field, and there are other ones that just run at the sight of you. But then I managed to photograph them quite up close. The one on the bottom left was having a good long nap. I was waiting for him for about half an hour to wake up, got up and did this big old stretch. On to autumn, which is a bit of a slower time of year, but still lovely to be out. Still nice and warm, thankfully, so I do like it. The images on the top of the chiff-chaff and the male stone-chat have both been rung, so that was taken at Keyhaven. And they'd been rung there a couple of years. I took these photos a couple of years ago, but it's for conservation to try and track the population, but also understand how the birds are doing as a species, taking readings on their biometrics such as weight and muscle to understand how the birds are doing that year. In autumn, I still photograph my mammals. I do love the red squirrels on Brownsea Island. Again, not quite Hampshire, but I thought I could include them. Used to be in Hampshire. And they are amazing to watch. The one in the top right, he actually crawled up my leg while I was trying to photograph him. It was such a good experience. And the bottom left, actually, a mammal not many of us get to see, is the polecat, which I spot. Me and my dad were driving back after school one day, and there was a really weird-shaped black object that ran across the road. I had no clue what it was. I managed to run home, pick up the camera, and run back out to the field. And eventually, I came across this gorgeous polecat for my first time seeing one, which is amazing to see a nocturnal animal like that, and get some photos. I do have to talk a little bit about game birds. I live in the South Downs, where there are lots of game birds released, over 10,000 just on the estate I live alone. But across the UK, there's between 40 and 57 million game birds released, which has a massive impact on biodiversity in the UK. So while it has a generally often thought of as quite a negative impact, I have to admit they are rather pretty and have been good to photograph too. Finally, I just thought I'd pop in some robin pictures to bring us back to winter. Some of my favourite ones, this one on the left is actually my best-selling picture, so it's been a pleasure to be able to take that a couple of years ago and still sell it the most every time I'm out selling photos. This is just a tiny selection of my work, and for more of it, I've got posted hundreds of them on my Instagram at Photos by Felix. And during the lunch break, I'll be selling some of my photos, but more importantly, if you want to ask me any questions, or just come over for a chat about photography or British wildlife, I'd love to talk to you. Thank you very much.